It started with a scream. A scream so piercing it sliced through the quiet of a small suburban neighborhood, jolting his mother awake before the sun had even risen. She rushed into the room, heart pounding, certain her son had fallen or broken a bone in his sleep. But what she saw was far worse. On the bed sat 12-year-old Daniel, clutching the right side of his face, tears streaking down his cheeks. His eye, once bright, innocent, and filled with childish wonder, was swollen almost shut, angry, red, and grotesquely puffed. It looked as though something had attacked him during the night. "Mom, it hurts," he whimpered, his voice trembling. At first, his mother, Laura, thought it must be an allergy, maybe a mosquito bite. Maybe he rubbed it too hard in his sleep. Kids get scrapes, rashes, little swellings all the time. But this was different. The swelling was too sudden, too extreme, too unnatural. She leaned in closer, expecting to see the familiar signs of an insect sting. But what she noticed instead made her skin crawl. The swelling wasn't just puffiness. It was alive with a strange tension, as though the skin around Daniel's eye was being pushed outward from inside. "Sweetheart, don't touch it. Just sit still," Laura whispered, trying to hide the panic in her voice. But deep inside, a primal fear clawed at her chest. This wasn't normal. This wasn't something a cold compress would fix. Daniel sobbed, pressing his small fingers against the edge of the swelling. "It feels like something's moving." Her stomach dropped. Moving? No, he must be imagining things. He was half asleep, scared. Children exaggerate. And yet, as she watched his face twist with pain, Laura felt a terrible certainty take root in her mind. He wasn't imagining anything. By the time his father, Michael, stumbled into the room, the swelling had already worsened. The entire right side of Daniel's face looked distorted, stretched tight like a balloon filled too far. Michael froze in the doorway, his mouth open but no words coming out. It wasn't just a swollen eye anymore. It was a grotesque transformation. "We need to get him to the hospital. Now," Laura snapped, her voice breaking. The car ride was chaos. Daniel writhed in the back seat, clutching his face, gasping for air between cries. His little sister, Emma, sat beside him, terrified into silence, staring at her brother as if he were someone she didn't recognize. The swelling pulsed with each heartbeat, like some sinister rhythm beneath his skin. At the emergency room, nurses rushed him into triage. Questions flew at the parents. Any allergies? Any recent injuries? Was he bitten by an insect? Did he fall? Laura and Michael answered each one, but nothing made sense. Nothing fit. The doctors pried his swollen eyelid open with delicate precision. For a moment, silence filled the room. Then one of them recoiled ever so slightly, eyes narrowing, face paling. "What is it?" Laura demanded, her voice cracking. The doctor didn't answer right away. Instead, he exchanged a glance with another physician. That unspoken communication, the kind that said something is very, very wrong, made Laura's knees buckle. They ran tests, blood work, scans. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as the minutes dragged into hours. Every second felt like torture, every beep of a machine like the ticking of a countdown clock. Daniel's pain grew worse. He whimpered that he could feel it inside, and no one, not his parents, not the doctors, could tell him what it was. Then came the moment that froze everyone in the room. On the monitor, as the images of Daniel's swollen eye flickered into view, the doctors leaned in closer, whispering. One of them stiffened. Another gasped quietly and covered her mouth. Laura's heart slammed against her ribs. "What are you seeing? Just tell us," she pleaded. The lead doctor finally turned, his face grave, his eyes wide with a mix of disbelief and fear. We need to investigate further," he said carefully, as if every word was weighted with dread. "But this isn't what we expected." The parents exchanged horrified looks. Not what they expected. What could that possibly mean? The nurses prepared Daniel for immediate observation. But Laura couldn't stop staring at the way the swelling seemed to shift. It wasn't constant. At times it bulged and relaxed, then bulged again, almost as though something beneath the surface was alive. She grabbed Michael's hand, her nails digging into his skin. "Something's in there," she whispered, trembling. "Something's inside our son. Michael shook his head, refusing to believe it, but his eyes betrayed the same terror. Hours passed like lifetimes. Every corridor felt colder, every passing doctor more distant. And then, when they thought the situation couldn't grow more unbearable, Daniel suddenly screamed. A blood-curdling cry that echoed through the sterile halls. His body thrashed, his hands clawing at his face. Nurses rushed to restrain him, alarms blaring, monitors flashing. Laura tried to reach him, but security held her back. She could only watch as her son convulsed in agony, the swelling on his face pulsing violently, like something inside was fighting to get out. The medical team worked frantically. The room buzzed with orders shouted in urgency. The word surgery was whispered. The phrase, before it spreads, was muttered. And then silence. Daniel lay motionless on the bed, sedated, his small chest rising and falling. His face looked monstrous, the swelling having grown even larger, twisting his once innocent features into something unrecognizable. The doctor finally emerged, his face pale, his hands trembling. He removed his gloves slowly, deliberately, as if he dreaded what he was about to say. Laura clutched her husband's arm. "Please, just tell us what's happening." The doctor hesitated, his lips parting, but no words coming out. His eyes darted back toward the room, then to the parents. Finally, in a voice barely above a whisper, he said, "What we discovered inside your sons, left us frozen in fear." Laura's knees buckled as the words echoed in her mind. Frozen in fear. The doctor didn't look like a man delivering a routine diagnosis. He looked haunted, as though he had glimpsed something that never should have been seen. Michael stepped forward, his voice shaking. "What do you mean? What did you find?" The doctor swallowed hard, glancing at the other medical staff who lingered nearby. He lowered his voice, as if afraid the walls themselves might overhear. "There appears to be movement inside the orbital tissue. It's not consistent with a typical infection or allergic reaction." Laura clapped a trembling hand over her mouth. Movement. That single word clawed at her insides like ice. Are you saying something's alive in there?" she whispered. The doctor didn't answer directly. Instead, he said, "We're preparing for an emergency surgical exploration. We can't risk waiting. If this is what we fear it might be, every second counts." Fear might be? The vagueness was worse than the truth. Daniel stirred on the bed, still sedated but restless. His eyelid twitched. His small fingers curled and uncurled, as though his body was fighting some invisible enemy. Laura wanted to scoop him up, hold him, protect him, but there was no protecting him from what was happening inside his own flesh. Within minutes, a team of surgeons in sterile gowns wheeled Daniel into the operating room. Laura tried to follow, but a nurse blocked her path gently. "Please, ma'am, we'll update you as soon as we know anything." She was left standing in the cold, fluorescent-lit corridor, her daughter clutching her waist, her husband pacing like a man trapped in a nightmare. Every tick of the clock felt like a hammer striking her heart. 30 minutes passed, then an hour, then 2. When the surgeon finally reappeared, his expression was even graver than before. His mask hung loosely around his neck, his eyes darkened by something Laura couldn't name. "We couldn't remove it," he said. Laura's voice cracked. "Remove what?" The surgeon hesitated, glancing toward the double doors of the OR as if the very room still contained the horror. "There is a foreign presence lodged deep within the tissue of his eye socket. At first, we suspected a parasitic infestation, but when we attempted to isolate it, it retreated further, embedding itself closer to the optic nerve." Michael's face went white. "You mean it moved?" The surgeon nodded grimly. "Yes, actively, as if it knew we were trying to extract it." The words shattered whatever hope Laura had been clinging to. This wasn't just swelling. This wasn't just an infection. Something alive was inside their son. Daniel was placed in intensive care, machines beeping steadily beside his bed. His face was still grotesquely swollen, but the doctors refused to attempt another removal until they ran more scans. They needed to know what they were dealing with. The next morning, Laura and Michael were ushered into a dimly lit consultation room. A radiologist pulled up the latest scans on a screen. The black and white images flickered, showing the shadowy contours of Daniel's skull. And then they saw it. A shape, small, elongated, nestled against the tissue behind his eye. It wasn't static. It shifted ever so slightly, as though coiling and uncoiling. Laura gasped, clutching Michael's arm. "Dear God!" The radiologist pointed with a trembling finger. "We believe it may be some form of parasitic organism, but the behavior we're witnessing, it's unlike anything documented in local medical cases. It appears to be responding to stimuli, light, sound, even the probing of instruments." Michael's knees weakened. "You're saying it's intelligent?" "We don't know, but we do know this. If it reaches the brain..." The radiologist trailed off, unable to finish. The silence that followed was worse than words. Daniel stirred in his hospital bed later that afternoon, his swollen eyes still grotesque, but his voice weak and pleading. "Mom, please make it stop. It's crawling." Laura broke. Tears streamed down her face as she held his hand tightly. "We're trying, baby. We're trying." Doctors whispered in corners, debating options. Some pushed for aggressive surgery. Others warned it could blind him, or worse. The phrase, "If we don't act now, it might be too late," repeated in hushed tones, fueling Laura's terror. That night, while Michael dozed in a chair, Laura sat awake by Daniel's bed. She stared at the monitor, her heart pounding each time the mysterious shadow twitched on the screen. Then, in the stillness of the night, she saw something that nearly made her scream. Daniel's swollen eyelid fluttered open just a crack, and within that narrow slit, something shifted beneath the surface. A ripple unnatural, like a snake coiling behind a thin veil. Laura staggered back, her breath stolen. Her son's I wasn't just swollen. It was a prison, and whatever was inside wanted out. By dawn, the medical team returned with grim news. "We've contacted specialists overseas," one of the doctors explained. "We've sent them the scans. They're baffled. Some think it resembles a tropical parasite, though we've never seen cases like this here. Others suggest it could be a mutated organism. Either way, we cannot wait. We need to attempt another extraction." The word mutated sent a chill through Laura's bones. The operating room was prepped again. Michael kissed Daniel's forehead, whispering promises he wasn't sure he'd keep. Laura tried to smile, but her lips trembled. Emma clung to her mother's side. Too young to understand, yet old enough to feel the crushing fear in the air. As Daniel was wheeled away once more, Laura's mind spiraled. What if he didn't survive? What if whatever was inside him spread? She couldn't shake the memory of his tiny voice whispering, "It's crawling." Hours later, the second attempt ended in chaos. The surgeons emerged pale and shaken. "It reacted violently," the lead surgeon admitted, his voice unsteady. "When we tried to approach it, his vitals spiked dangerously. It's almost as if it sensed us. We had to stop before it killed him." Laura collapsed into a chair, sobbing uncontrollably. Michael stood frozen, fists clenched, his face pale as death. For the first time, the doctors looked helpless. And then came the words that pushed the family's nightmare into uncharted territory. "We've never seen anything like this before. If we don't act soon, we may lose him. But if we act recklessly, we may unleash something we don't understand." The room went silent, and as the weight of those words hung in the air, Daniel let out a weak groan from his bed. His eye twitched violently. The swelling pulsed once, twice, and then a faint, almost imperceptible sound escaped the boy's face. A slithering sound. Something bigger was coming. Laura hadn't slept in 2 nights. Her body sat rigid in the plastic hospital chair, but her mind spun endlessly. Each beep of the monitors was a reminder that her son's life hung by a thread. She stared at him, pale and frail beneath the wires and tubes, and wondered how much more his small body could endure. Michael stood by the window, arms crossed, jaw clenched. He hadn't spoken in hours. Not to the doctors, not to Laura, not even to Emma, who had curled up in the corner with a blanket, clutching a stuffed rabbit as if it could shield her from the horror unfolding before her eyes. The silence was unbearable. Finally, Laura broke it. "You're shutting down," she whispered, her voice raw. Michael didn't move. "I'm trying to hold it together." She shook her head. "You're not. You're hiding. That's not the same thing." He turned then, his eyes red, his face carved with exhaustion. And what would you have me do? Scream? Break down in front of our children? What good would that do? Laura's lip trembled. At least it would show you care. The words landed like a blow. Michael's fists tightened at his sides. Don't you dare, he snapped, his voice cracking. Don't you dare think I don't care. I'm terrified, Laura. Terrified that I'm going to lose him. Terrified that I can't protect him. And you know what terrifies me most? That this thing inside him isn't random. Laura blinked, confused. What are you talking about? But Michael didn't answer. He just turned back toward the window, his reflection ghostly in the glass. That night, while Daniel slept under sedation, Emma whispered from the corner. Her voice was so small it nearly disappeared beneath the hum of the machines. Mom, is Daniel going to die? Laura's heart shattered. She knelt beside her daughter, smoothing her messy hair with trembling fingers. No, baby, we're not going to let that happen. But what if the thing inside him goes into me? Emma asked, her eyes wide with innocent terror. Laura's throat tightened. She wanted to say it was impossible, that her daughter was safe. But how could she make promises when even the doctors had no answers? Instead, she held Emma tightly and whispered, I won't let anything hurt you, ever. But deep down, she wasn't sure that was true. The following morning, tension snapped. A heated argument erupted between Laura and Michael outside the hospital room. You're hiding something, Laura accused, her voice trembling with rage. Michael froze. What? You keep saying this isn't random. You've said it twice now. What do you mean? What aren't you telling me? Michael's face darkened. He looked down at his shoes, then back at her. For a moment, he seemed like he might confess something. But then his jaw tightened again. This isn't the time. Not the time. Laura's voice rose, echoing down the sterile corridor. Our son might die, Michael. If you know something, if you've done something, you tell me right now. Nurses turned their heads. A doctor paused mid-step. But Michael only shook his head, his eyes filled with something Laura had never seen before, guilt. Later that day, while Michael disappeared to make some calls, Laura sat alone at Daniel's bedside. Her son stirred, his swollen eye twitching as though something inside him was dreaming its own nightmare. And then he spoke. Weak, barely audible, but enough to chill her blood. It's talking to me. Laura leaned in, her chest tightening. What do you mean, sweetheart? Who's talking to you? Daniel's lips trembled. His good eye rolled toward her, unfocused. The thing, it whispers. It says it's not alone. Laura's breath caught. Tears filled her eyes. She kissed his forehead, whispering, Don't listen, baby. Don't listen. But deep inside, terror clawed at her, because children didn't invent things like this. They didn't imagine whispers inside their own flesh. That night, Michael finally returned. His face was pale, his hands shaking. Laura pounced. Where have you been? What are you hiding? He sat heavily in the chair, burying his face in his hands. Silence stretched so long that Laura thought he might never answer. But then, in a voice barely audible, he said, This has happened before. Laura froze. Her blood ran cold. What do you mean? Michael lifted his eyes. They were haunted. When I was a boy in my village, a cousin, he had swelling, strange swelling in his face. Doctors couldn't explain it. They thought it was an infection. But it wasn't. It was something else. And when they finally tried to cut it out, his voice broke. He didn't survive. Laura stared at him in horror. And you never told me this? Never? Not when we first saw the swelling. Not when the doctors asked about history. You kept the secret while our son... Her voice cracked, rage and grief colliding. How could you? Michael slammed his fists against his knees. Because I thought it was impossible. Because I thought it couldn't follow me here. I thought it was gone. Some curse of the old country. Something buried with the past. But now I know I was wrong. Laura's entire world tilted. The fear she already carried multiplied tenfold. This wasn't random. This wasn't chance. Their son wasn't just sick. He was part of something older, darker, and far more personal than she could have imagined. The next day, Daniel woke again, trembling, drenched in sweat. His swollen eye twitched violently, and he clutched his mother's hand. "Mom," his voice cracked like dry leaves. "The Whispers, they said they're waiting for me." Laura's tears spilled freely. "Who's waiting for you, baby?" Daniel's good eye locked onto hers with terrifying clarity. "The others." Laura staggered back, nearly collapsing. The room spun. "The others?" The doctors rushed in, alarms blaring as Daniel's vitals spiked. His body arched, his mouth open in a silent scream. Michael tried to hold him down, but Daniel's small body shook with a strength that wasn't his own. The medical team worked frantically, but Laura couldn't hear them. All she could hear was her son's trembling voice echoing in her skull. The others. And in that moment, Laura realized a nightmare they were facing wasn't just medical. It wasn't just physical. It was something that reached far deeper, into the family's past, into their secrets, into the shadows of something unspeakable. And it was only just beginning. Laura couldn't shake Daniel's words. The others, they clung to her mind like a parasite of their own, writhing in the silence, repeating with a weight that threatened to crush her. The hospital room smelled of antiseptic and fear. Machines buzzed. Nurses hurried in and out. But Laura wasn't watching any of it. She was staring at Michael. "You knew," she whispered, her voice low and trembling. "You knew something like this could happen." Michael rubbed his face with both hands. Exhausted. "I didn't know. I only suspected. I prayed it would never follow me here." Her nails dug into her palms. "Follow you? What are you talking about?" He hesitated, glancing at Daniel's fragile body on the bed, then back at her. For the first time in their marriage, Laura saw something alien in her husband's eyes. Not just fear, but recognition. "There was a letter," Michael said finally, "years ago, from my uncle. I burned it, thinking it was madness. But now I wonder if it was a warning." Laura's blood ran cold. "A letter about what?" Michael didn't answer. Instead, he pulled his wallet from his pocket and removed a small, folded scrap of paper, yellowed with time. "I didn't burn all of it." Laura took it with shaking hands. The paper was brittle, the ink faded, but the words were still legible enough to read. "It begins with the I. Do not ignore the swelling. Do not believe it is harmless. It is never alone. Where one takes root, others wait. They whisper, and the child will hear them before you do. If you see movement, it is already too late." Laura's stomach lurched. Her fingers trembled as she held the fragile paper. This is insane." Michael's voice cracked. "My cousin's death was an infection. It wasn't an accident. My uncle believed something was inside him, something alive. And he believed it wasn't just one." Laura pressed the paper to her chest, her breath shallow. "And you didn't think this mattered? You didn't think I needed to know this when our son woke up screaming with a swollen eye?" Michael's face twisted with guilt. "I thought it was just superstition, old country nonsense. But when I saw Daniel swelling, I knew. I just couldn't admit it. Because if it's true," he trailed off, his voice breaking, "if it's true, we're facing something far bigger than medicine." That night, while Daniel slept in uneasy sedation, Laura couldn't stop thinking about the letter. The words burrowed into her mind. "It is never alone. Where one takes root, others wait." At 3 a.m., unable to sit still, she left the hospital and drove home. Every shadow of the empty house seemed heavier than before, as though the walls themselves knew secrets she didn't. She rummaged through drawers, boxes, closets, searching desperately for anything Michael might have hidden. And then she found it. In the attic, tucked inside a dusty wooden box that had once belonged to Michael's uncle, was a sealed envelope. The paper was brittle with age, but the wax seal was unbroken. Her hands shook as she cracked it open. Inside were pages of frantic handwriting, scrawled in both English and a language she barely recognized. The fragments she could read chilled her to the bone. "They come in the night, first the eye, then the voice, then the silence. I have seen them burrow. I have seen them whisper through the child's lips. They want hosts. They want bloodlines." But the final line made Laura drop the pages to the floor, her heart hammering. "If one is taken, the family is marked. She staggered back, gasping for breath. Marked? Was this why Daniel had been targeted? Because of Michael's family? Because of something buried generations deep? When she returned to the hospital, her hands still smelled faintly of the dust and decay of the attic box. Michael looked at her, and she knew he could see the truth in her eyes. "You found it," he whispered. Laura's voice cracked. "Why didn't you tell me?" Michael's shoulders sagged, his face crumbling. "Because I thought if I ignored it, it would never touch us. I thought moving here, building a new life, leaving it all behind would keep us safe. But you can't run from blood. You can't run from what's inside you." Before Laura could answer, Daniel stirred again. His good eye fluttered open, glazed and glassy. His lips moved slowly, painfully, but the words that came out weren't his own. "They're waiting," he whispered. "They're close now." Laura collapsed into the chair beside him, clutching his hand. "Daniel, baby, fight it. Please fight it." But his gaze was distant, as if he were listening to something she couldn't hear. His voice came again, low and eerie. "They're in the walls. They're coming." Laura's blood turned to ice. The doctors increased sedation, whispering among themselves. But Laura wasn't listening to them anymore. She was thinking of the letter. She was thinking of the box in the attic. She was thinking of the phrase that wouldn't leave her mind. "The family is marked." The next day, an infectious disease specialist arrived from overseas. His name was Dr. Alvarez, a man with a sharp gaze and the weary aura of someone who had seen too much. He studied Daniel's scans for hours in silence before finally speaking. "I've seen something like this before," he said quietly. Laura leaned forward, desperate. "Where?" Dr. Alvarez hesitated. "Deep in the Amazon. Remote villages. Cases were rare, but when they appeared, they were devastating. Children mostly. Swelling, movement beneath the skin. And then disappearance." Michael's throat tightened. Disappearance? The doctor's eyes were grave. "Yes. Some were taken into the forest, never seen again. Others stopped being themselves before they died." Laura's stomach churned. "You're saying this thing inside our son isn't the first?" Dr. Alvarez shook his head slowly. "No, but it may be the first here. And if the patterns repeat, there will be more." Laura clutched her chest, struggling to breathe. The room seemed to close in on her. She thought of Emma, small and innocent, clutching her stuffed rabbit. She thought of Daniel whispering the others. She thought of the letter, warning that a family was never alone in this curse. That night, she dreamed of whispers. Whispers in languages she didn't understand, crawling along the walls, seeping into her ears. She woke with a start, gasping for breath, and found Emma sitting upright in the corner of the hospital room, eyes wide and glassy. "Emma?" Laura whispered. Her daughter turned her head slowly, unnervingly slow, and whispered, "I hear them too." Laura's scream shattered the silence. The scream brought nurses running, but by the time they burst into the hospital room, Emma was sitting quietly again, clutching her rabbit to her chest. Her wide eyes blinked innocently at the staff, as if nothing had happened. "She's fine," Michael insisted, trying to calm the chaos. "She just woke from a bad dream." But Laura couldn't shake the sound of her daughter's whisper. "I hear them, too." That night, the family fractured under the weight of fear. Laura sat rigid in the chair beside Daniel's bed, trembling, while Michael paced the room, muttering to himself. Emma, exhausted, eventually fell asleep, but not before staring for long minutes at her brother's swollen face, as if watching for something only she could see. Laura's nerves were frayed beyond repair. She turned to Michael, her voice sharp. "This isn't coincidence. You knew this could happen. First your cousin, now our son. And now Emma's hearing things too? Tell me the truth. Tell me everything." Michael stopped pacing. His face twisted with torment, but his silence was worse than words. "Michael," Laura screamed, her voice breaking. "If you love your children, you'll tell me." He slammed his fist against the wall, the sound echoing through the sterile room. Then, finally, he spoke. "When I was a boy," he said, his voice ragged, "my father warned me. He said our family carried a shadow, something ancient, something that chose us. He called it the Serpent of Eyes. Laura froze. The what? Michael's eyes were haunted. It burrows. It waits. It marks bloodlines. My cousin was just the first. My uncle swore he'd seen it move from one child to another, like it was hunting us, feeding on us. But no one believed him. They called him cursed, mad. And when my cousin died, he swore it wasn't death. He said the boy had been taken, chosen. Laura's breath came in shallow gasps. And you never thought to mention this before we had children? Michael's voice broke. I thought it was superstition. I thought moving here, leaving it behind, would break the curse. But look at him, Laura. Look at Daniel. It's happening again. Daniel stirred, groaning softly. His swollen eye pulsed violently, as if something inside was pressing outward. The skin twitched, rippling like water disturbed by a stone. Laura staggered back, her stomach heaving. Dr. Alvarez entered at that moment, his face grave. He gestured for Michael and Laura to step into the hallway. I need you both to understand, he said quietly. What's inside your son? It isn't behaving like any parasite I've ever studied. It doesn't just feed. It interacts. It resists. It responds. And now your daughter is showing symptoms. That means... No. Laura cut him off, her voice fierce. You're not touching her. You're not taking her away. Dr. Alvarez's eyes softened, but his words were firm. If it spreads to her, it may already be too late. Michael collapsed against the wall, his hands clutching his head. Laura's mind raced, the letter's words flashing before her. If one is taken, the family is marked. Suddenly, a shriek echoed from Daniel's room. The three of them sprinted back inside, and what they saw froze them in place. Daniel's body convulsed violently. His swollen eye bulged grotesquely. The skin stretched to its limit. Beneath the surface, something writhed, something long, something alive. Laura screamed. Emma woke and cried out, clutching her rabbit as she backed into the corner. Michael lunged forward to hold his son down, but Daniel's body bucked with unnatural strength. And then it happened. The swelling split. Just for a moment. Just a crack. But from that crack, something glistened. Wet. Slippery. It coiled against the light before retreating back beneath the skin. The doctors shouted orders. Nurses rushed in. A scalpel gleamed under the sterile lights. But Laura couldn't move. She couldn't breathe. She had seen it. Not imagined. Not a shadow on a screen. A living thing. Inside her son. The surgery that followed was chaos. They tried again to extract it, but every attempt pushed Daniel closer to collapse. His vitals spiked, alarms blaring. One surgeon shouted, "If we go any deeper, we'll lose him." Another snapped, "If we stop, it'll spread to the brain." In the observation room, Laura clawed at the glass, sobbing. Michael stood frozen, tears streaming down his face. Emma buried her face in her rabbit, whispering softly to herself. But Laura heard it, the words, clear as day. "They don't want him," Emma whispered. "They want us all." Laura spun toward her daughter, her blood turning to ice. Hours later, Daniel lay unconscious, barely clinging to life. The surgery had failed. The surgeons looked hollow, defeated. "We couldn't remove it," the lead surgeon admitted, his voice heavy with despair. "It's too deeply intertwined. Any further attempts could kill him instantly." Laura collapsed into the chair, sobbing uncontrollably. Michael knelt beside her, holding her hand, but the weight of his guilt was crushing. Dr. Alvarez approached quietly. "There may be another way," he said. Laura looked up, desperate. "What? Tell me." The doctor hesitated. "I've heard rumors. In remote villages, rituals, ways to drive it out. Not medicine, not science, but something older, something darker." Michael's eyes widened. "No, not that. We can't." Laura's voice rose, trembling with fury. "If it saves my son, I don't care what it is." The doctor nodded slowly. "Then you need to understand. If we attempt it, the truth will be revealed. And it may not be just about Daniel. It may be about your family. All of you." Laura stared at him, her mind whirling. She thought of the letter, the whispers, the attic box, the thing coiled inside her son's eye, the way Emma's voice had changed in the night. And for the first time, she understood this wasn't just a parasite. This wasn't just a curse. It was a claim, and her family had already been chosen. The hospital felt colder than ever that night, though the thermostat read the same. Laura sat beside Daniel's bed, her hand gripping his limp fingers, her heart pounding with a rhythm that matched the beeping of the monitor. His breathing was shallow, his face pale, his swollen eye hidden under thick bandages. Michael hovered near the door, unable to meet her gaze. Emma sat cross-legged on the floor, her rabbit in her lap, her small lips moving in whispers Laura pretended not to hear. Dr. Alvarez returned just past midnight. His face was drawn, his eyes shadowed by sleepless hours. He carried a small, battered leather satchel, the kind that looked out of place in a sterile hospital. He placed it carefully on the counter and turned to Laura. "You need to decide now," he said. His voice was low, urgent. "If we do nothing, whatever is inside him will grow stronger. It will not stop until it has complete control." Laura swallowed hard. "And if we try?" Dr. Alvarez hesitated, glancing toward Emma. His silence was answer enough. Laura stood abruptly, fire flashing in her eyes. "I don't care what it costs. I'll do it." Michael stepped forward, his face twisted with fear. "Laura, you don't understand. These rituals, my father spoke of them. He said they demand more than anyone can give. If we do this, we might save Daniel, but we might lose everything else." Laura rounded on him, fury blazing. "We've already lost everything. Look at our son, Michael. Look at our daughter. If there's even a chance, we take it." Michael's mouth opened, but no words came. Dr. Alvarez nodded slowly and began to open the satchel. Inside were strange tools, small jars filled with black liquid, a string of brittle, yellow bones that rattled when he lifted them. The air grew heavy, charged as though the hospital itself recoiled. He laid the items out carefully, whispering words in a language Laura did not know. The fluorescent lights above flickered once, then steadied. Emma's head snapped up. She stared at the doctor, her voice low and strange. "They don't like this." Laura's blood turned to ice. "Emma, sweetheart, what do you mean?" Emma tilted her head, her eyes glazed. "They said it's too late. Daniel isn't theirs anymore. He belongs to them." Michael staggered backward. "Oh, God." Before anyone could respond, Daniel's body convulsed violently. His back arched, his limbs thrashing against the bed. The monitors screamed, alarms filling the room. The bandages on his face soaked through with blood. And then the lights went out. Darkness swallowed the hospital wing, broken only by the red glow of emergency lights. In that crimson glow, shadows stretched impossibly long. The sound of static filled the air, like a radio tuned to a dead channel. Laura screamed for the nurses, but no one came. The halls beyond the door were silent, empty, as if the entire hospital had vanished. Then Daniel's voice spoke. But it wasn't Daniel's voice. It was deep, ancient, crawling through every corner of the room. "You cannot take what is ours." Laura froze, her breath caught in her chest. Michael grabbed her arm, pulling her back, but her eyes were locked on her son. The bandages tore apart, and there it was, something alive, something coiled and glistening, pushing outward from his ruined eye socket. It wasn't a worm. It wasn't an insect. It was something older, something intelligent. It stared at her with a pupil that wasn't human, glowing faintly in the blood-red light. Emma rose to her feet, her rabbit clutched tight. Her voice was calm, too calm. "They're not here for him," she whispered. "They're here for me." The thing inside Daniel hissed, a sound that wasn't sound at all but vibration, rattling the walls, shaking the floor. Dr. Alvarez dropped to his knees, chanting frantically, clutching the string of bones until they snapped in his hands. Laura tried to scream, but her voice broke. She reached for Emma, but Emma stepped backward, her eyes fixed on the thing that had taken her brother. Michael shouted, grabbing for his daughter, but at that moment the lights blazed back on. and Daniel's bed was empty. The monitors flatlined, the sheets soaked with blood. But Daniel was gone. The room was silent, except for Emma's whisper. They said he was only the beginning. Laura collapsed, her sobs breaking into the sterile air, while Michael stared at the empty bed, his face hollow with horror. Dr. Alvarez whispered one final word, barely audible, "Chosen." And in the distance, somewhere deep within the hospital walls, a slithering sound echoed, growing louder, closer. The lights flickered again, and the screen went black.